An ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, the Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov, says Chechen forces have been deployed to Ukraine. Kadyrov saying his troops have yet to suffer any losses, although we have not been able to verify this information. Well, to talk more about this, we welcome to the program Igor Lukes. He's a professor of history and international relations at Boston University, focusing on Central Europe. Thank you so much for speaking to France 24 today. Now, Ramzan Kadyrov is the head of the Chechen Republic, a majority Muslim republic in the Caucasus. Remind our viewers who Kadyrov is and explain his relationship with Putin.
Well, it's hard to use diplomatic language when one thinks of Mr. Kadyrov, but the only words that come to mind is that he is a war criminal. He is a puppet of the present-day Kremlin regime who was imposed in his office as a result of the Second Chechen War that was launched in 1999-2000 by the then still very unknown Mr. Putin, who was just, in fact, installed as the prime minister of the failing Yeltsin presidency and then chosen by the departing Yeltsin to be his replacement. And Mr. Putin at that time had a popularity rate somewhere between 1% to 3%. And it was then that he launched the Second Chechen War, using often very coarse language to describe what he thought of Muslim people in the Caucasus and specifically in Chechnya. And it was that war that made him the so-called war hero and war leader that he became later on. So Kadyrov is a puppet of the Putin regime who is held in power by the presence of Russian arms in Chechnya.
You just mentioned the second war in Chechnya. Chechnya has been twice the scene of deadly wars with Russia following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Tell us more about that history.
Well, the history is very long. I'm sure you wouldn't have time for that. But let me just say that the great Russian writer Tolstoy personally took part in the Tsarist campaign to conquer the Caucasus, including Chechnya. So the Russian presence in the Caucasus dates back centuries ago, and it of course then transformed into the Soviet era, and it then became a hotspot in the 1990s when the Soviet Union was dissolved at the end of 1991. Because the Chechens and the Ingush and all the other local nations, who, by the way, had been brutalized under the Stalin regime, mostly deported in an attempt to kill all of them, really, deported to Siberia. So by 1990s, they were now hoping to gain their own independence. And it became a kind of a very difficult political issue from the point of view of the Russian public. Hence, the First Chechen War in the middle of the 1990s, which ended up in a kind of a draw. In those days, the Russian oligarchs basically purchased peace by handing over suitcases of cash to the Chechen insurrectionists. And therefore, the First Chechen War in the middle of the 1990s had failed to find a permanent solution that would be acceptable to the Kremlin. Hence, the Second Chechen War I have already mentioned.
All right, thank you, Igor Lukes. That's all we have time for now, but thank you so much for joining us with your analysis today.